Hello, welcome back to another episode of Ask the Doctor with Dr. Jeffrey Sherman. Today, we're going to be talking about how to improve your patience during the COVID-19 pandemic and the steps that you should be going to improve your patience as we are all basically just waiting in our homes. The COVID cases of today, which is August 20th, are as follows. There are 5.5 million cases in the United States, and there's 172,000 deaths. The numbers have increased dramatically over the months, and we hope the death count is going to stay low because we've improved our medical knowledge of COVID as we've gone through the pandemic. Well, let's welcome Dr. Sherman to the show. Hello,
Nice
Dr. Sherman.
Thank you very
Nice
much.
to see you again.
Real good.
Yes. So patience is kind of it's a more harder to grasp topic than other topics that I believe that we've done. Because it's in some ways it's like the topic of waiting, I believe. Does patience have any medical definition necessarily?
Necessarily, no. It's more of a. It's a physical and mental. There's physical and mental components to being patient. Mostly mental. I mean, but physical too. Physical can help the mental. We've talked about in previous shows with moving around and exercise and that kind of thing, which can reduce stress. With that, then the body can become more patient. But it's a mind thing. It's a mindset, grasping the reality of the situation, of when a vaccine will be available, when it will be not only available or approved, but widely distributed, and then once it gets distributed, who gets it first, who gets it second. You know, the regular folks are going to have to still wait in line once it gets produced. So it's a mental thing, being prepared, knowing the long haul is still, relatively long haul is still in front of us. And we just got to accept our current habits as what it's going to be like for a while and try to make the most of it, like I said, with exercise or entertainment in other ways.
Right, yes. And one thing that I thought about when you mentioned vaccines is we can't exactly rush out the vaccine to every single person when it comes out, not just because it takes time to make them, but because we can't really have huge crowds, I think, at places where they're distributing vaccines because we don't want people getting sick right as they get a shot.
Right. So it's going to be distributed in a sort of a sliding scale or in a tiered form. One, it's going to get they're in the stage 3s. Some of these companies are in stage 3 trials, and that means that's the final stage, and the data's looking pretty good. And at the same time, they're mass producing it so that when it does get approved, there's a ton of inventory ready to go to be shipped, but that's still not enough for everybody. So the first wave of people to get it, and you're right, to avoid crowds at pharmacies and wherever, will be the elderly folks, over age whatever, say 70, 68, and the healthcare workers, the frontline healthcare workers will get first. And then there's a lot of people there. And so the general population has to be patient. Even when the vaccine is available, it's still going to be months, possibly months, before they get their shot at the vaccine, once all the frontline folks have been vaccinated first.
Exactly. And what's interesting too is that the like 50, no, not 50, 80 years ago, about 60 years ago actually, was when smallpox was eradicated. Correct. Correct me if I'm wrong about that
I'm not
date.
sure. I'm not sure. You may be right, but that's about 1960. I have to look it up when
It was
smallpox was eradicated.
okay. I just got a fact check. It was 1940s.
Okay, so 75, 80 years ago.
Right. And the the thing about smallpox, of course, was that it was rampant around the entire globe. Wherever humanity was, there was smallpox.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the case now with COVID, is that it's everywhere wherever humanity is. So we might have to search out vaccines, or not search out vaccines, but search out populations that may even seem somewhat isolated to make sure that they don't have COVID, so that it can maybe like mutate and re-enter our population, because that
Right.
could
So
be a risk.
you have those folks, and then unlike the 40s where I think everybody was on board with vaccines, you got the small percentage of folks who are, I don't know, I may call them the anti-vaxxers, the folks who think that vaccines cause autism and don't give their kids vaccines and don't believe in them, and they're not going to get this vaccine either. And there's a say 10% of the folks who believe that, and they're not going to get the vaccine. So COVID's still going to exist in potentially those folks. Now, if you've been vaccinated, you can be resistant to it, and there's some protection. My point is, it's not going to be eradicated like smallpox was because of these anti-vaxxer folks, and that gives some mutations the opportunity to develop. And so, if you can't eradicate something completely, and you keep it around, you're opening the door for still some other potential trouble.
Right.
I
And
don't know.
that's going to be it's going to be an international effort, just as it was an international effort to prevent spread of COVID and develop a vaccine. It's going to continue to be an international effort
Yeah.
to then eradicate the disease as best we can, hopefully off the globe, so that we don't have to deal with it again.
Yeah, but I
And
keep
if
on
we
saying
do,
I just want to get it down to where the statistics that the flu is. Now
right,
if we can get it to be what the flu is, then we're okay, because like I said, we accept what the flu is with its risks, and so we'll often we'll watch flu change your life much for it.
exactly. That's kind of what the consolation prize, or rather consolation goal, should be. Is if we can't eradicate the disease, then we need to get it to be as lethal and as spreading as the flu, because then we know how to deal with the flu. So if we have the
Right.
disease as similar to the flu as possible,
And
then we'll
the
be
death
pretty
rates aren't so
okay.
bad. The illness is a
Exactly.
little rough, but you get over it. What's also
Exactly.
frustrating about this, and we have to have patience to find out the answer to this question, is what are the long-term effects of getting the COVID in some folks. Some folks require at least have recovered beautifully in the immediate post recovery period. Other folks are in the ICU and are sick, but they do recover. The question is, what happens 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now? Do they get? Do they have trouble, breathing? Do they run out of breath, short of breath on room air? Are they going to need oxygen? What's going to happen? Maybe nothing. Hopefully nothing. But we need to have the patience to understand what can be coming down the pike from the COVID. Flu, we kind of know. You get the flu, you'll be okay in 5 years. This, we don't know, but there's no way of knowing until down the road, and we got to think it through, be patient, and watch things develop and unfold. I wanted to just kind of bring that into the patience discussion.
Exactly. And that kind of brings back to patience, because one of the key things with being able to be patient is also being able to be mindful, being able to know why something is being inconvenient or why something is being slow can help you better understand and be patient, I guess.
Right.
Be able to slow down and accept what's happening. And then
Right.
that's why we do.
Understanding how the public health works, understanding how vaccines work, understanding how the approval process works, understanding how data is needed to govern how we respond. These data and the way the virus works, it's not and the way the testing works, it just takes some time. It's just kind of the nature of the way it is. So if understanding that will help each one of us become patient and understand, hey, it's going to take some time before we know some answers. Nothing I can do now. Let's wait it out so when the answers come, we can be ready. Um,
Exactly.
it's hard to be patient these days. Our lives revolve around cell phones where text messages come up instantly and you can answer right away, and emails come up and you can answer right away, and videos or YouTube, you push search for something and it comes up right away. You don't have to wait. But this is now waiting. This is testing us a little bit. And that's where we got to train our brains to wait it out and accept it.
Exactly. And that's exactly why we do this show, is because education and just knowing what's going on and knowing what has to be done improves your patience for everything to happen. Because, I mean, one of the large reasons that any of us really get frustrated at things is partially because, well, we might not understand it completely. I mean,
Right.
for example, even with people, it's really easy to administer hate on somebody that you don't know versus somebody that you do know. And that could be attributed to the fact that because with the person you might know the cause of however or whatever action they did. And so you can excuse their behavior that you don't like.
Yeah.
Whereas someone else, you're kind of free to just dislike their behavior. And patience is that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. And tolerance and accepting
Exactly, tolerance.
the way it is. Yeah. And we all are, itching to do normal stuff or be in the presence of people that we haven't been close to for the last 5 or so months, or allow them in our homes and stuff, and you just and it's just a exercise in mind thinking it through and just knowing. I mean, there is an end point to everything. This is not forever. That's
Right.
part of the way to get by it too. Um, if you know that there's an end point, when it is, not exactly sure, it's not tomorrow, but there is one that can get you through the frustrating days and give you a different kind of an outlook.
Right. And now patience is is related to the body, of course. I mean, that's we are the body that is trying to be patient. And
Yeah,
so what I mean is actions that you can get yourself to do can improve your patience mentally. And probably one of the most thrown about things is deep breathing, is slowing down your breathing rate, taking deeper breaths.
yeah,
Um, uh, do you have any more details about the deep breathing process?
yeah. It does. If you can, yeah, take the deep breath and inhale as much as possible and hold it for a few seconds. Not so you become short of breath, but you just hold your breath a couple extra seconds so the lungs can really exchange the oxygen. Then there's more oxygen in your bloodstream. Do it a couple
I
times in a
see.
row. More oxygen flow to the brain. It's healthy, good. It helps you think a little bit more clearly. It helps. It prevents headaches. It and it exerts more of a sense of of calm. Doesn't work in everybody the same, but the more oxygen you can get into your blood by slower, deeper breaths, holding it so the oxygen exchange can eliminate as much CO2 as possible and absorb as much oxygen as possible. You're getting your blood fully saturated, and that it's all in the brain, and it can give give you a sense of calm, thinking clearly, and knowing, it kind of helps with relaxation, which then will help with outlooks and patience and logic thinking and acceptance, things like that. Now, I'm no
Exactly.
psychiatrist, but these are the kind of steps that help with those kinds of things.
I actually really like that. I didn't even think about the oxygen exchange that happens in the lungs
Yeah,
happening better
you
because
hold
you
the
hold the
oxygen up against the alveoli in the lungs, more time for the oxygen out in the open to exchange, and you get a little bit of a purer breath. We don't do that on every breath, but if you can do it a couple times a day, even, you'll get a little extra oxygenation. Yeah, you want to get as much oxygen into the bloodstream as possible.
exactly. Yeah, and oxygen is I feel like we should be measuring we always talk about and you always hear about carbon dioxide levels in the air in the atmosphere being high,
Yeah,
being caused by human activity, but the CO2 levels in your local air that you're breathing can also be very important because if your CO2 levels around you that you're breathing are a little too high, you can actually start having detrimental mental effects, such as a measured 15% decrease in cognition at about uh, 500 parts per million, which doesn't really mean much to most of us. Um, but I think
yeah,
but it's like this. It like bedrooms tend to have a higher carbon dioxide level than other rooms because you kind of just sit in there for 7 hours or 8 hours, and you're just
yeah.
breathing the same air over and over. The windows may or may not be open. And it's just examples like that. We'll probably do a show about that later. But I just kind of wanted to briefly say how, yes, your oxygen levels that when you inhale do affect your mental state, and that's why
Right.
it's important to deep
And
breathe.
and your body. I mean, your body can handle a little excess CO2 in the air. Your
Of
kidneys and
course.
lungs regulate that, so you can, you're not going to become CO2
Yeah,
toxic
you're not gonna die.
by locking yourself in a room for overnight or things like that. It is good to have a plant in the house to just offset just general CO2, but that's not going to make you sick, because your body's
Yeah, it's
got
not.
good compensation for it. Um, what when you get into trouble is when you know you've seen in the movies the person puts the car exhaust in the car, and then you're breathing all the fumes
Uh-oh.
and the CO2 from the car.
Right,
That's
yeah.
that's bad.
Yeah, that's just
That's what you.
toxic. I mean, it's the stuff coming out of an engine is not what you're supposed to breathe.
Not so bad. Yeah. Right.
I
We have 21% oxygen in the air, a few percent CO2, and mainly nitrogen. So
we have a comment from the chat about
oh, very good.
the younger generations. Wish there was more of support system from say singers, actors that show how important it is to wear a mask. Then maybe the younger generation will listen. So I see what's going on here because the I mean, for example, of course, when you're watching entertainment, even entertainment that was made during the pandemic, the actors aren't wearing masks because the masks do obstruct their face, which of course is like a huge
Right.
center point for entertainment. Um, but maybe if the actors and singers did wear masks, then it would keep reminding younger generation people or just anybody that watches those shows to
Yeah. I
wear those
mean,
masks.
they're very targeted audience. They're very moldable. I use the word moldable, coachable, impressionable. They can you can with folks they see every day wearing masks, they'll emulate them and follow suit. Um, I mean, I don't want to lump that whole group into one
Right.
mindset,
Yeah, of
but
course.
because there's some smart kids who do wear the mask. I'm sure you do. I know you do, and
Yes.
and your friends, but they have to be exposed to folks who they look up to and can say it's okay to wear a mask. The TV shows are a good example. Have there been? I mean, you may know this. You have there been shows made during this that are airing that are poo pooing the mask or neglecting it? I
Um,
guess.
I actually, for one, don't watch TV shows that often.
Right.
So I have not seen anything like that. But yeah, I
I've
haven't
been
even heard.
watching. Now that sports, and we had a sports show earlier in the season, but actual games are being played now. And I don't know, but some kids are probably watching those games as they would a TV show. And the coaches and the players on the sideline and the players and the personnel who are not in the game are on the sideline wearing masks down there. I mean, that's a good, role model. They're athletes and stuff. If they see their athlete folks wearing masks on TV, then that's a good sign that they'll follow suit. They look up to those athletes as much as anyone, I would think.
Yeah, and what's kind of funny is that, or not really funny, but I saw on the internet a mask product that was designed by a company. I don't have it on hand. It was a mask that kind of looked like swim goggles, uh, and it was clear. You could
Yeah.
see the person's mouth and nose and everything underneath it, but it was still sealed, and of course had pores to let out and in air. It's not airtight.
Right.
Um, and I'm thinking that maybe actors, singers, pop culture figures should wear stuff like that, because that way their faces are, for the most part, not obstructed, so
Yeah.
that you can get all the emotions and everything that you capture from that part of the face.
It was a
But of
plastic.
course,
It was a solid plastic mask that.
yeah. And then the sides are rubber, and then
Yeah. So
there's
it's a nice
holes.
seal.
Yeah, there's holes on the sides, so that of course you
Yeah.
can breathe, because it can't be airtight.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. I mean, those are so you can see their face. So it's not such a. So you can still see the face, which is what people want to. They want to be seen, or it's a little bit less unnatural, and they can breathe well, and so yeah. I mean, masks are now a big business in different styles and different forms of them.
And one thing that's true about uh, patients and people during this pandemic is that some people kind of thought the pandemic was over a little too early, when well, simply it wasn't. The disease wasn't gone. We didn't have a vaccine yet. And that's kind of a case of patients where people were kind of just out of it, and that's totally fair, because it's been months of quarantining, of being like this, so people kind of want it to be over, but it's just not over. It's just not. And being able to try to understand that the virus just it's still out there. It's like an invisible foe, except that it has very, very real consequences. I mean,
Yeah.
through recent locked and not anti-lockdown, recent release of lockdowns at schools, like in North Carolina, I believe it was North Carolina,
Yeah.
like their school, their college, university, a week or two after opening had to close again because of
Yeah.
outbreaks. And you can see that when you release lockdowns, it's a cause and effect relationship. It happens so quickly,
Right.
and you just can't really avoid it at all. Even if you think everyone that you're including in the group is going to be good, the virus moves invisibly in that it can infect without symptoms.
It's gonna keep moving, and and if you start to loosen the valve, it'll spread and branch out. Even you don't know it. Um, I mean, I heard today a colleague of mine whose daughter's is at USC. You mentioned University of North Carolina. They had to shut down. A USC apartment building, then they're online in terms of classes, but some of the kids are living on campus in their own apartments. A couple of cases were detected in this apartment building, and they closed the apartment building, and now all the folks who live in the apartment are got to go home. The kids wanted to live on campus, so they you go too fast, you got to dial it back, and the thing spreads faster than and then you rewind the clock, and then you got to exercise your patience to be until it you can't just expose yourself in an apartment building. Then you got to go home. So
Exactly.
if they
Yeah.
had a little patience, they'd probably still be living there and having a little more of a college experience than being at your parents' house having to quarantine for 2 weeks because your best friend after a party is not feeling great.
Right. It's just kind of unfortunate how everything happens. But we just can't ignore it. Even it's really easy for a lot of us to observe everything that's happening and see it as like separate from ourselves. Maybe because we see it like on TVs or on screens, and so it feels separate than like in the flesh. But we have to just remind ourselves that it is very real in the flesh, and that our individual actions do in fact affect lots of other people because of the
Sure.
nature of diseases. The study of diseases, epidemiology, explains this quite well.
Exactly, and we just gotta know it's every action we have during the day it affects the next day. And if you're deliberate and patient, the numbers will go down, which will give us a little bit more freedom down the road. We don't want to, if we all wear masks and are patient, we'll get a little bit more normal in a couple months than if we're impatient and not wearing masks. We'll just go on at this level until there's a vaccine. And like I said before, I mean, who knows when that's going to be. So if you're patient and wear masks and be respectful and follow the rules, more likely you'll be doing what you want to do sooner rather than later.
One important thing to always remember is that if you're feeling overly anxious, or you just, you feel like you just need to do something, that you're not patient anymore, and if you want to be, then feel free to contact your friends or your close family on things like social media, or even phone calls or video calls, for support. And one thing that's important to remember too is that you don't have to rush the meeting. You don't have to be talking the entire time and then like close the call when you're done talking. You can just leave the call on. That's kind of the point of patience, is being able to train yourself to wait. It is hard to do that, like we said earlier, and that's why we have to learn it. As anyone who is patient has probably learned it through their life, and you can still learn it.
There's a portion of patience that is inherently given to you, and then there's another part that is learned or practiced. Most of us these days are beyond what we can accept, and now we actively have to, call for support, go out and get a little exercise, take those deep breaths, do the things to clear our head, to accept the current state, knowing that it's not forever. I mean, you just got to keep that in mind. It's not forever. Establish a routine day to day. Get outside. Take a drive if you can. Things that'll still maintain distancing, but changing up the days a little bit to help the time go, so that when you do you're ready for that vaccine down the road, and you're not over anxious and spreading the virus, going places you shouldn't be going.
Exactly. And remember, there's always resources. There's plenty of resources online. There's also something called Google Scholar, which is a Google search engine, but specifically tailored for peer-reviewed studies. And in that way, you can put in search terms like patients, and you
Yeah.
can find studies, scientific studies, on the topic, if you are looking for something that is more hardcore proven. One other thing too is there's a nice little comment from the chat about she bought a breathing spirometer to build up her lungs.
Oh,
I've
good.
never heard of a breathing spirometer. What is that?
Uh, we give these to patients who have had surgery and they're in the hospital recovering, because when after you've been cut open and have an open scar and you're recovering from let's say a colon surgery or a pancreas surgery, you're laying in bed and you're not standing up very much, so your lungs, by laying down in bed, are kind of in this crunched, consolidated position. So what we do is we leave this breathing machine at the patient's bedside, and every 4 or so hours they take a big deep breath on it, and then it shows little ping pong balls moving, and you try to get the balls to move as high of a level as possible, and it keeps your breath. So by expanding your lungs, you're avoiding fever and pneumonia after surgery, and it's a way to breathe deeply, even if even if you haven't had surgery, to expand your lungs and get that oxygen in. You can watch the ping pong balls go up. It's called, yeah, a spirometer, or an incentive spirometer. Keep those balls moving to as high level as possible. You can see if you can break a record.
It sounds like a funny game, and that is kind
Yeah,
of
exactly.
the best way to exercise, is to make it into a game.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And you'll see post-op patients can barely get the first ping pong ball up. By the time they're out of there, all of them are rising to the top. So it's a good way to,
that's great.
to track your progress, and even for those people who just want to expand their lungs, they can see how well they do and take those deep breaths and measure it. It's kind of a poor man's measuring way. You can kind of watch the ping pong balls rise and get to the levels, target levels that you want to get your lungs to be expanded as
Exactly.
most.
And of course, that will improve your breathing, your lungs. That will improve your deep breathing, I'm sure. And always remember, when you're deep breathing, to hold your breath in, and for a couple seconds, not too long, of course. You still need to breathe, and then breathe out, breathe in,
Right. Yeah, it's exactly what those
and doing
spirometer
that multiple
machines
times.
are having you on, by holding your breath, and then it just stays up there, and then you let it go.
All right. Well, I think that's a nice place to end off the show. Is there anything else you wanted to mention?
No, but I mean, it's just, we all have to be patient. We all have to be on the same page. All of us. I mean, people listening to the chat, who will watch the chat, like, they're not alone in being frustrated and impatient. Everybody's feeling the same way. So when you see other people making sacrifices, they're doing it, and so should everybody. There's not one person, but I can't handle it, so I'm going to go out and you know spread corona. We all got to work together. That's my
Mm-hmm.
point. We're all
Yes,
going through this, so we all should respect and do the same behaviors.
exactly. Well, thank you, Dr. Sherman, for being here for another episode of Ask the Doctor.
Very good. Thank you.
If any of you would like to have a private consultation with Dr. Sherman, his office email is in the chat, towergastro@gmail.com.
Yep.
If you would like to send us a question to answer next show, our email is myworldsciencetv@gmail.com. And until next week, stay safe.